Okay,
Yes, good. That's working. So go ahead, and you, Joseph, have 25 minutes.
excellent. So thank you to the organizers for the opportunity to talk today at our virtual workshop. So my name is Joe Osborn. I'm a postdoc at Oak Ridge National Lab, and today I'll be talking about the requirements status and plans for track reconstruction at the sPHENIX experiment. Let me see if I can go to next slide. Okay, so I just want to give a brief introduction to sPHENIX. So sPHENIX is an experiment that is currently being constructed at the Relativistic Heavy Ion Collider at Brookhaven National Laboratory. So for those who don't know, RIC is a heavy ion focused accelerator facility that can accelerate a wide variety of hadronic species, from protons to deuterons, helium, all the way up to gold ions and even uranium. Previously, RIC has been running for about 20 years now with the STAR and the pHENIX experiment, but sPHENIX is an upgrade that is a brand new experiment that's being built where the pHENIX experiment previously was. And it's really the next generation of QCD detector at RIC, as it is a dedicated jet spectrometer, the first of its kind that will be built at the RIC accelerator facility. So just to give a quick overview of our timeline, our collaboration was formed in late 2015, right before we received DOE's CD0 approval, where we received funding to actually start working on the project from the Department of Energy. And then just last year in 2019, we passed our PD23 review, which means that we actually received all of the funding to buy materials and begin construction of the spectrometer. So we are currently right now in the middle of 2020 or so, and actively building many various parts of the sPHENIX subdetector, of the sPHENIX detector, sorry. So the plan is to install and commission the detector in 2022 and then start physics data taking in 2023, where we plan on taking 3 years of physics data. So just to introduce the sPHENIX physics program, we usually mention the 2015 long-range plan for nuclear science that was released by the Department of Energy and the National Science Foundation here in the United States. And one of the things that the long-range plan stated was a priority in the next decade or so was to, quote, probe the inner workings of the quark-gluon plasma by resolving its properties at shorter and shorter length scales. The complementarity of RIC and the LHC is essential to this goal, as is a state-of-the-art jet detector at RIC called sPHENIX. So really the physics goals of sPHENIX are to probe the quark-gluon plasma that is created in heavy ion collisions at the different sort of conditions that are available at RIC center of mass energies when compared to the LHC center of mass energies. So to do this, we have sort of 3 main pillars of our physics program. The first is jet substructure, where we plan on measuring fully reconstructed jets with hadronic and electromagnetic calorimetry, as well as tracking for the first time at RIC. When we talk about jet substructure, we talk about both substructure from grooming algorithms like soft drop algorithm, as well as fragmentation functions, where we look at single hadrons within jets. Another major physics program is with upsilon spectroscopy. So sPHENIX will also measure the upsilon 1, 2, and 3s states via their electron decays, and use these to study the melting properties of the quark-gluon plasma. So because of the different binding energies that each of the upsilon states have, this will allow us to study interactions with the quark-gluon plasma. And then the last pillar is more generically described as QCD flavor physics, where we will be measuring especially bottom quark jets and comparing their, again, interaction characteristics with the quark-gluon plasma to light quark jets especially, but also charm jets. So of course, all 3 of these these physics pillars require tracking to a serious degree, and this is one of our main challenges that we face in preparing for data taking. So just to give a quick outline of the sPHENIX detector, our spectrometer is a central rapidity detector where we have full coverage in azimuth and pseudo-rapidity less than about 1.1. So the major components of our detector are a MAPS vertex detector, or the MVTX, which is just outside of the beam pipe. We have an INTT, or the intermediate tracker, which is another set of silicon strips. These are both enclosed by a time projection chamber, which is shown in this engineering drawing as the yellow cylinder there. And then following this, we have our usual calorimetry that one might expect to see in a collider type experiment, where we have an EM-cal, an inner hadronic calorimeter, and then our solenoid is actually the previous Babar solenoid. So it provides a 1.4 Tesla magnetic field. And then just outside of the solenoid is an outer hadronic calorimeter, again, that we use for our jet reconstruction. So just to elaborate a little bit more about the tracking detectors, the MVTX is based on monolithic active pixel sensor technology. There are 3 layers of the MVTX, and the detector technology is largely based on the ALICE inner tracking system. For those who don't know, if you look in this engineering drawing, you can sort of, for those who are familiar with the ITS, you can see the similarities, and this is sort of a half barrel of silicon staves that connects to electronics that are farther down the beam pipe. Just outside of the MVTX, we have the INTT. So this is 2 layers of silicon strips that is based on a silicon strip detector that was built for sPHENIX and used in 2013 to 2016 or so. And then finally, we have this compact continuous readout TPC. So this is a cool picture because you can see the size of the TPC, but also see that we are really getting going on building things and constructing the various sub-detectors. So this TPC is about 2 meters or so in diameter, and it has 160,000 channels. You can see the diameter of the TPC by looking at the people that are standing right next to it. So what are our physics requirements for tracking? Our physics requirements are really driven by the Upsilon and jet substructure programs. The Upsilon requirements have us needing that E plus E minus pairs from the Upsilon decays have a resolution of less than 100 MeV for the Upsilon mass. So this corresponds to about a 1% tracking resolution for 4 to 8 GeV tracks. So this is a plot on the left here that shows some simulation in PP type events where we are currently achieving a mass resolution of about 87 MeV in PP collisions, and you can see that we can nicely resolve each of these Upsilon states. For higher momentum tracks, for the jet substructure program, we really need sort of modest tracking requirements that are listed there. And then on top of these sort of resolution for tracking requirements, we need to have high reconstruction efficiencies due to the smaller Upsilon and jet cross sections that are available at the RIC center of mass energies. So RIC nominally operates at a center of mass energy of 200 GeV. So compared to the LHC, Upsilon masses of 10 GeV and jets that have PT of tens of GeV have a much smaller cross section. So we really need high reconstruction efficiency to be able to do these physics programs. So these requirements may seem not so intense, but the most important part about these requirements is that they need to be robust against large background environments because there's a significant potential for out-of-time pileups sampled in the TPC due to the long TPC integration time. And one should also consider that sPHENIX's physics program is not only in PP collisions, but it's primarily in gold-gold collisions, which creates a different type of event environment. So let me talk a little bit about these constraints. So RIC will deliver gold-gold collisions to sPHENIX at about 200 kilohertz. So on average, we will see about 3 to 8 pileup events per bunch crossing. and sPHENIX will record gold-gold collisions at 15 kilohertz. So we only will be recording a small fraction of the rate that RIC will actually deliver to us. However, this will still result in about 100 billion gold-gold events in a 22-week run in a given year. So over a 3-year running period, this will correspond to collecting about 250 petabytes of data. And our data processing is planned on a fixed latency finite size computing center at Brookhaven. So on top of this, one should also consider that in gold-gold collisions, there are of order hundreds, if not up to 1,000 particles that are produced in a head-on gold-gold collision. So when you take this and you superimpose on top of it several pile-up events, and then you also consider that the integration time of the TPC is somewhat long, you have a very challenging background environment that needs to be overcome, where you are reconstructing tracks precisely from a given vertex, but also knowing exactly where they are in your detector. So we really require high-speed, efficient, and precise tracking in an environment where of order hundreds of thousands of hits are expected. And on top of this, we need to reduce our tracking time to less than 5 seconds per event in these conditions, since we're operating on a fixed computing center. So this is really a challenging environment, and in some senses, it's very similar to what the high luminosity LHC will experience in several years. And we will be experiencing these similar sort of conditions in terms of the noisiness of the environment in 2023 and in the forthcoming years. So let me just talk about our current status. So for track seeding, we were previously using Huff seeding, and we found that this was not remotely close to what we were going to need for operating on our fixed computing center. Our Huff seeding was taking about 400 seconds per event in realistic minimum bias plus pile-up type simulations. So obviously this is not even remotely close to sufficient. So we have been actively exploring cellular automaton seeding using R trees. So at the moment we have this R tree seeding implemented, and this algorithm is just a geometric indexing that gives seeds based on nearest neighbors, and then provides a simplified track estimate to a track propagator. So this R tree seeding method has significantly reduced our seeding time to, as you can see in this plot, about 0.1 seconds or so in a minimum bias gold-gold plus pile-up type environment. And on top of this, in the last few months, we've been exploring cellular automaton seeding, and this shows indications of further improvements. So this has made a really big step in the right direction for getting our tracking time under 5 seconds per event. So to follow the seeding then, we have track propagation and fitting, and this plot on the left shows our full track reconstruction time about 6, 7, or 8 months ago now, I guess. And you can see that the average is about 9 seconds per event, and currently our track propagation is performed using GenFit. So this is using the R tree seeding, which was already improved significantly from Huff seeding, as well as the GenFit propagation. And so we really need to cut this down by at least another factor of 2, since our goal is less than 5 seconds per event in these minimum bias gold-gold collisions plus pile-up type environments. So in the last couple of months, we've started actively exploring using ACTS for track propagation and fitting. And I just have a short slide about ACTS. I know that many of you probably already know about it. It's been mentioned a couple of times in this workshop already. But ACTS is a software project that's being developed by primarily Atlas and some Bell 2 and LHCb collaborators, as well as some other experiments, and is intended to be an experiment-independent set of track reconstruction tools that provide performant and flexible algorithms for track reconstruction. So I also encourage you to check out Zhao Kong's and Bastian's talks, I believe tomorrow at this workshop, for some more of the nitty-gritty details about how ACTS works. I'm going to talk about today sort of the beginning of our experience at sPHENIX, of using AXE and trying to implement it as our track fitting software package. So how do we actually implement our geometry within AXE? So AXE, very nicely, thanks to the developers, contains a root T-geometry plugin. And of course, like most experiments, sPHENIX has a full JANT4 description. So what we do is we provide ACTS with our already created T-geomanager object to build our tracking detectors. And ACTS creates these surface objects that correspond to the T-geometry objects in our JANT4 description. So this is a nice little image here that shows the output of the ACTS geometry reconstruction. You can see the MVTX in this blue inner detector here, as well as the INTT, the two layers of green silicon staves here. So this is a nice diagram showing that indeed you can actually match one-to-one all of the T-geometry objects that are in our GeoManager to an AXE surface. So if you were listening carefully to me, you will probably ask the question, where is our time projection chamber, since this is one of the main components of our tracking system. And at the moment, ACTS does not support continuous type TPC geometries. So at the moment, we are currently building AXE plane surfaces ourselves that actually approximate the TPC readout geometry. So this is an image of what we have implemented so far. These black surfaces on the very outside here correspond to boxes that we have built to mock our TPC that corresponds to its readout geometry. If you look carefully in this image, you can see sort of closer to the center, the green strips are the INTT layers. And if you look very carefully, you'll see some purple there, and those are the MVTX layers. So at the moment, this is what we are going to use to try and push ahead to see what ACTS can do for us and how it might improve our track fitting time. We are in discussion with the developers on a more flexible fitter, which creates ACTS surfaces on the fly based on where clusters are identified in the TPC. So this would be really nice, since this continuous geometry, you could of course find a cluster anywhere that charge was ionized. And so in principle, a very flexible way to perform the fitting would be to just provide ACTS with the cluster position and have the track fitting software build itself a surface corresponding to that cluster and then perform the track fit. So just a comment that additional detector geometries in ACTS could be useful for other experiments. I know that for this TPC geometry, we've been in discussion with Bell 2 as well about how this might be implemented within ACTS. And in the US, especially in the nuclear physics community, there has been a lot of work in the last few months on starting R&D for an electron-ion collider detector. And there has been some discussion about potentially trying to use ACTS for an EIC detector as well, which will have some different sort of detector geometries. So how does ACTS and the JANT4 world of sPHENIX interact? What we have done with our software is designed it in a way such that the sPHENIX specific code stays within sPHENIX. So this is nice and convenient because it allows simple updates of ACTS as well as simplified debugging for when we run into problems. So what we have done is we've taken our JANT4 description of our detector and created maps between each of the TGeo nodes for the tracking detectors and the ACTS surfaces, so that in a simulation of a Pythia event or something like this, there will be a registered cluster on some TGeo node that our clustering algorithm provides, and then you can immediately look up the ACTS surface that corresponds to that TGeo node and send it off to the track fitter. So this is we've found so far to be a nice way to actually correspond these two different geometry worlds in a quick way. So our software is open source at github.com. So if you're curious, I encourage you to go look or ask me about it. But we have designed our software in a way to be really flexible such that we can interchange these various seeding, propagating, and fitting algorithms that we have explored. So at the moment, the way that the sPHENIX software works is that there's what we call the node tree. That's really the centralized data storage object, and we have several modules that interact with the node tree to provide different steps of the ACTS fitting process. So for example, we have a module that takes the output of our clustering algorithm and then creates the ACTS clusters called source links that are necessary for calling either the combinatorial Kalman filter or the track fitter. We chose to do this so that we could interchange various either seeding or propagating or fitting algorithms to try and figure out what works best, and also to see if we could verify different things against each other to see how they both perform in terms of time as well as physics output. So to conclude, sPHENIX is a dedicated jet and heavy flavor experiment that's currently being constructed at the Relativistic Heavy Ion Collider. And we have a number of computational challenges that we need to overcome and prepare for before we start taking data in 2023. In particular, the one that is present at the moment is that we need to reconstruct 100 billion heavy ion collisions on a fixed computational center at Brookhaven National Lab. So this is really the challenge that we are having to address, and one of the ways that we are trying to improve this is by exploring ACTS as a track reconstruction toolkit in sPHENIX to move our track reconstruction time per event to below 5 seconds. So we hope to see results in the next few months where we can compare, for example, ACTS and GenFit, as we just really started to work on implementing this reconstruction toolkit in the last couple of months. So we are excited to get some results and look and see at how it can improve things for us. So thank you, and I will be happy to take any questions if you have any.
Thanks, Joe. So I'm looking for raised hands. A quiet audience today. Okay, let me ask you then one question. So far in the implementation that you've done, have you found that everything out of the box in ACTS just fits your needs, or have you encountered things where you needed to request changes or make changes or adapt things because they don't really fit?
So that's a good question. And I think actually I would say it's been pretty straightforward. So we haven't actually been able to run the ACTS track fitter quite yet because there are some geometry changes that are needed for the sPHENIX geometry that have not been put into the master branch yet. So we have sort of gotten everything set up to run the track fitting, but we haven't been able to really validate or verify that we have set things up correctly. So one thing that did need to be done is there had to be there had to have been implemented some changes to correspond to our particular silicon tracking geometry that were not in the ACTS repository before. But after that, it's been, I think, pretty straightforward for us to get things set up within our sPHENIX software framework to call ACTS. At least as far as we can tell, we have set things up. And it remains to be seen whether or not we have done that correctly. But hopefully we'll find that out in the next few months or so.
So let me just add one sentence. There's certainly, due to the fact where the original code comes from, which is a lot from the Atlas track reconstruction, the lack of a proper DPC implementation and a strategy how to do it is certainly something which for sPHENIX is super interesting. And I think it's right that you also push that in a direction now, and there's an ongoing discussion with Bell 2, and I think that's really something where we can all learn how to properly put that on a common grounds which can be used for several experiments.
Yeah, so Andy can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Bell2 and sPHENIX are really the first experiments outside of Atlas to try and really implement this.
Yeah, CAPC has a similar experience.
Okay.
So it's a similar setup. So there's a package, I think, which is also a critical mass, and all of those experiments have probably a person power of one, roughly one, working on that. And if we can bundle that, we have a person power of 3, and that is, I think, a way more critical mass to do something.
Right. Yes, I think to answer your question, it's an exciting time that people are starting to get interested in ACTS and really start to think about how they might implement it in their own particular detector or experiment.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so I don't see any other hands. So I think we now go back in time a little bit to the previous presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And